Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Well, it's Pastured Pig Podcast time again, and so glad you all decided to join us, that you've downloaded our podcast or that it's automatically popped up in your feed. Either way, I'll take it. This episode, we're kind of coming at the interview process a little differently. A while back, a couple weeks ago, I'd put out a call asking people that are brand new in pastured pigs, if they consider themselves a novice or just starting out, that we'd like to hear from them and interview them. So I've got a couple interviews coming up in the next couple weeks involving that, where some people graciously stepped forward and said, yeah, I'm new at this. I've only been at it maybe a year or a year and a half, 2 years type of thing. So we've got some interviews coming up that from that perspective, and I think you're going to find it interesting. I enjoyed talking with these people. But before we get into that, just some quick updates. Here on the farm at Red Tool House, we've finally gotten some rain after 7 weeks of complete drought, dryness. We've had a little bit of rain, although it was only about a half inch, so it really didn't do much. But I think there's some more forecasted in the remainder of this week, so we're hoping that'll come. I definitely feel very confident now that my two sows have settled. We've now missed 2 heat cycles for each. No swelling, no stand, no discharge. Actually seeing a little bit of shape to their bellies, actually a little firmness there. So I think we're in the clear so far. We'll see how that goes as we move up. That puts us at a farrowing date of November the 24th, I believe. And we're going to have some videos detailing that and even building up. We're actually working on new farrowing barns, so we'll have that on our YouTube channel. But got a lot going on here in the next couple months to be ready for that. One more quick note. We will be at, I think I mentioned this a while back or a couple episodes ago, we will be at the Homesteaders of America Conference in October. That's down in Front Royal, Virginia. So I know our audience overlaps a little bit with homesteading. So if you happen to be at that event, look for us, yell at us. I'll be the tall, goofy-looking dude, probably wearing my Red Tool House hat, since that's all I wear. So just check us out. Come up and say hi if you see us. Well, as I mentioned, first-timers just getting started in pastured pigs, wanted to get people's opinions and their perspective of just diving into that. So tonight we have Jack Pollner, and he's with the Mindful Homestead, and that's up in New Hampshire. And Jack's only been at this, he's got 1 year under his belt of raising pigs on pasture. So I appreciate him coming on, appreciate him sharing his story with us. So we'll dive right into that interview with him now.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. I am very glad you all take the time to listen and to be a part of the podcast. I appreciate all the feedback we've been getting. Tonight, we're going a little different with our interviews, and I'm excited about kind of going in this direction. I have several lined up this way, people that have just started in pastured pigs. So I think it's important to look at different perspectives, and I think it's important to see how people are getting started out. So tonight we have Jack Pollner with us. He's up in New Hampshire on the Mindful Homestead, and this is his first year getting into pastured pigs. So Jack, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Troy.
All right. Well, so in New Hampshire, you said, and I believe you said this is your first year in raising pastured pigs?
This is our first attempt at making a go of doing the pastured pig thing, yes.
Got it. Okay, so this will be, bear with me, this will be kind of, I'm excited to do this. It'll be kind of fun. So let's do just a little bit of background. So are you a farmer by trade? Do you have any farm experience?
I am not necessarily a farmer by trade. We've had chickens for a couple years now, and my wife and I, we were getting our pork from a friend up in Maine who raised Mangalitas. And about a year ago, he decided he was going to be kind of getting out of the pork business, if you will. It was just a side hobby for him. And since we didn't have a kind of readily available supply of pastured pork, he had offered one of his Mangalita pigs to us, and we had looked into kind of the ins and outs of raising Mangalitsa's for meat rather than lard. And the breed didn't really appeal to us, but the idea of kind of bringing our own pigs in and taking on kind of the task of raising our own pork did appeal to us. And we just kind of jumped in this past spring with both feet, my wife and I.
Okay, so you ended up starting with the Mangalitsa?
We didn't start with the Mangalitsa.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Okay.
We found a local woman who has a farrowing operation, relatively small, and she was selling landrace Yorkshire crosses. She has a landrace sow and a Yorkshire boar. She had come recommended through a few friends that we talked to, and we ended up getting our piglets from her.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. So in New Hampshire, I was actually up in your neck of the woods just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, were you?
Yeah. We were doing a Maine trip or a New England trip. Ended up in Maine, but came through. Of course, we had to do Mount Washington when we got to New Hampshire. So
that's one of the standbys that you got to do when you're in town. Yeah.
I got to say, as a West Virginian who's been proud of his mountain heritage, I got a little white knuckle driving up to the top of Mount Washington. That was a little precarious in a couple places. So
it's a pretty good drive. I mean, I won't say I'm used to it now, living up here for a long time, but it's one of those things where it gets a little bit less unnerving every time you go take somebody up there.
Yeah. Okay, so your farm, how much land do you have set aside for your pig operation?
So we're on 10.5 acres, and we're still relatively pretty small with what's actually dedicated to the pigs. We are, of the 10.5 acres that we have, probably 95% of that is forested, split half and half between softwoods, a lot of spruce and white pine, and hardwoods, which are maple, oak, and some beech in there as well. So when we made the decision to kind of bring pigs in, the first kind of hang up that we had was, well, where are we going to put them? And that kind of led us to look at forest pasturing as an option, which I didn't even realize that existed.
Yeah.
But that's what we kind of ended up doing, and it's worked out well so far.
Okay. So let's back up. So as you were able to find this lady that had some pigs that had recent farrowed, and you decided to get some from her, what was your how many did you go with, and what was your rationale to pick that number?
We were planning on 2. The rationale there is that we know pigs do best in pairs. We didn't want to raise just one. And we figured that one would be steady for us as far as the supply. It's just my wife, myself, and our 1-year-old daughter. But we knew that it was kind of better for the pig to raise at least 2. So we were planning on going with 2. When we spoke to the woman that had the farrowing operation, she had mentioned that she had 3 left, and she wasn't really interested in breaking them up. She kind of just wanted to finish off with that operation there. So we ended up taking in 3. And the way it worked out was we had a couple friends that were interested in pork. So we did half shares there. And then my parents actually ended up taking a half share as well. So we ended up having all of the pork accounted for virtually within the first few weeks that we had the pigs. So we decided to jump right in and go with 3 for our first run. And they're on about an acre of land now. So we have room to kind of grow that operation and scale it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great. I think 3 is always the magic number I recommend when people ask me about getting started, because it's same mentality there. Keep one for yourself, sell one to a friend to help offset the cost of the feed, maybe even cover the cost of the feed, and then the third one you can decide whether you're going to continue your herd and use that as breeding stock.
Yeah, and it helped too that we had about 16 chickens for just over a year. And we had recently kind of scaled that up. We're at around 35 chickens now. And it kind of brought into focus that when you're raising animals, I mean, the amount of labor involved going from, relatively small numbers higher is not necessarily too involved. So when she said she wanted to sell us 3, and we just kind of looked at each other and said, all right, well, how much harder could raising 3 instead of 2 be?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's a scalability. There's some hard benchmarks at certain scalability, but you're right, exactly right. Yeah. That 2 to 3 to 5. Yeah. Really not that much more effort there.
Nope.
Okay. So right now, so you're talking about having all of this forest land, and it sounds like you listed off some pretty good hardwoods there. So having them on that 1 acre in the woods, have they been able to access mast? How have you seen how they've handled the 1 acre of pasture so far? How have they treated it?
They've treated it pretty well. When we first brought them in there, it was relatively overgrown. There was a lot of kind of understory, green mass that they were able to access. And they went after that pretty quickly, which was great for them. They were eating a lot of, young birch trees that were growing up. And that was a viable source of mass that they actually went after, which was pretty cool. Now, as we're moving into fall, we ended up, they were born April 15th. So we have our slaughter date set for early December. We're actually working with Dan Profit of Butcher Pete's Mobile Meats.
Butcher Pete.
I know you
Awesome.
had on before.
Yeah.
And we're working with him. So we actually have our slaughter date a little bit later than some people that start pigs earlier around here. And what that's allowing us to do is right now we actually have acorns dropping from a lot of the oaks, kind of the first round. And that's a mass crop that they've actually been able to access as well. To the point where if you walk through that space where we have them, you won't find any acorns on the ground at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're pretty quick about getting them hoovered up.
They are little vacuums. All right. So again, thinking about getting started, what, you described why you chose pigs. Of course, you had the source. You were getting your pastured pork from a friend or from a neighbor there, and that went away. But at that point, did you decide? Was it because of your experience with chickens? You say, "Hey, I think we can do this. Let's take this on."
Yeah, we had obviously having a daughter, that just entered our family last September. We had kind of taken a good hard look at where a lot of our food comes from. I'm a hunter and fisher just by my nature as well. So we had always had, venison and fish that I'd caught as part of our food supply in the house. And we had kind of made the loose decision when we moved onto this property a few years ago that by 2020, we'd like to have a large portion of the food that we consume generated by us or by, somebody that we knew. Obviously, with our land the way it is, we knew we weren't going to take on a beef cow or anything like that. But because of the versatile nature of pigs, it was kind of the next logical step for us where, okay, we're not getting our pork from our friend Tommy anymore. Maybe we can, do this ourselves. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
Excellent. Yeah. So what preparation, so that you're getting up to the day that you're going to go get these pigs and bring them home. What was your prep like? Were you prepared well in advance, or was it kind of fly by the seat of your pants?
It was a little bit of both. I had been watching YouTube videos for a while. It's an awesome resource for kind of the new homesteader or new pastured pig raiser out there. There are tons and tons of videos accessible, both on an extremely technical level, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, or just from a broad kind of bird's eye view at everything. That was a resource I had used. The Pastured Pig group on Facebook, which I know you've spoken about before. That was an awesome resource as well. I could get in there and ask some questions. But really, I had their water set up. We're using a 55-gallon drum with a nipple put into it. That was done well in advance. I had a 16 by 16 enclosure for the piglets before we trained them to electric. That was done well in advance. But I built an 8x4 pig house, and then I built a self-serve feeder that we could use if we go on a weekend trip or something like that. And both of those were done, I would say, the day before we brought the pigs home, if not maybe a day or two after, when it was totally finished and hammered out.
Well, if I were to tell my story, when I first got started, you had been way more prepared than I. That's excellent. Well, okay, so you've had them on pasture all this year. Now, you talked about finish date going into December, and with New Hampshire weather, how's that going to affect? When's snow going to start blowing up there?
We've had snow as early as October, and it's not typical to get a significant snowfall in October or November for us. If there is an issue where it comes down to that, we kind of have a contingency plan that we can access some hog panels pretty quickly and get a more permanent enclosure set up. We have them on 2-strand electric right now through the woods, which kind of ran the best of both worlds, but also the worst of both worlds. It's obviously not providing a lot of enclosure for them if we were to get, 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. they'd be able to either bust right through it. And it's not providing a lot in the way of protection against predators either. But as far as moving it and being able to kind of access them to more areas, we are looking to kind of expand that territory in the next couple weeks, so they're able to access more of that mast. The 2-strand is great for that. But if it does come down to it, where if we have a significant snowfall forecasted, the plan is essentially to just grab a whole bunch of hog panels and start hammering T-stakes into the ground before it freezes solid to get them in a more permanent enclosure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So talking about your 2-strand through the woods, so 2 things there. You kind of mentioned predation. What predator issues do you have up there? And have you seen any sign? Have you come close with anything?
I haven't come close, really. The only concern that I had mainly was coyotes in the area. We do have black bears. However, they're not generally going to give livestock a hard time. We've seen black bears more often at our bird feeders in the front of the house than trying to get into the chicken coop or in the back. Coyotes really were the only concern that we had. And on the East Coast, they're not necessarily as much of an issue with pigs. I was worried about it because I know from a deer hunter standpoint, they do prey on deer around here. But a lot of people I spoke to said they don't worry about coyotes, and we haven't seen an issue so far. We do allow our dogs to kind of run around the backyard. They're not in with the pigs, but they are on the other side of the fence, and I feel like their scent kind of keeps coyotes away as well. Yeah,
and I've discovered, we have coyotes here in West Virginia, and it seems to me that coyote, just like a dog or even our cats, we notice they really can pick up on that electric fence. And,
they know something's different about it. And we're in with the pigs every day too. Our top wire is at 18 inches, and I actually will go in there. We feed them largely on the ground. So I'm in there every day. I'll put their food on the ground and they can eat it and give them snacks. And my scent is definitely kicking around the enclosure as well as the pigs. So I think the coyotes are they've got plenty of woods around that they can go and run around in. So they kind of leave the pigs alone.
Okay. Well, you had mentioned deer, and here in West Virginia, we have issue. In fact, I went back and replaced all of my pasture wire went from 17 gauge down to 14 gauge because the deer just keep blowing our 17 gauge open and tearing it up. Do you have issues with deer, or in your count, maybe moose up there?
We do have moose in the area. I haven't had any issues with moose or deer getting into our fence. Like I said, our top wire is at 18 inches, and we're using metal T-stakes at the corners with plastic kind of step-in posts in between. And I feel like if a deer came through and kind of blew it over, it would end up knocking the fence over. I like to think that the pigs are happy enough in there and we keep them well fed that they wouldn't really run amok. If it does happen, it's kind of going to be a surprise for us. Being that we're a little bit on the smaller side of things, we didn't invest in a perimeter fence for our first season, so we're kind of winging it and hoping that if something like that happens, the pigs will just kind of stay local.
Well, and I think you're onto something there. I think when you look at this, again, it becomes a balance of infrastructure. How much money do I throw at this in the initial as I'm just testing this out? There's times, I found myself saying, wow, I really wish I'd have gone ahead and done this because now I'm paying for it, or wow, I really overdid this. But that's a good point. When you look at your setting, so you're 10.5 acres, are you pretty rural? Do you have a lot of neighbors around you where an escaped pig is going to become an issue?
We're pretty rural. It's not something where we do have neighbors around, and if the pigs were to get out, they may make their way over to a neighbor's property. But there's not so many people around where it would ever really become an issue. I think it would be along the lines of I'd be getting a phone call and it would be, hey, your pigs are over at my house, come get them. The advantage for me is that I work mostly from home. So it does provide me the ability to kind of wander out there, once or twice a day, and kind of put eyes on the pigs and make sure they're around. And if they're not around, I would know pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's obviously that's a nice benefit of being able to work from home and keep an eye on the farm there. But you're right. In my experience, and I think everyone kind of is afraid that, hey, my pig got out. He's going to disappear. In your case, he may be in Vermont or in Maine within a day because he's just going to book it out of here. And we've discovered that as a pig knows where its food source is. It knows where the comforts are, so it's going to return to that situation unless it's gotten spooked or totally lost its direction. But yeah, they usually always come back home.
And I think it's a balance that a lot of small time producers have a hard time figuring out their first couple of years, is that you don't want to get too attached to it, because obviously the pig is a food source for you, and it's going to be becoming a food source, and it's not a pet. But at the same time, I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that they're very intelligent animals, and if you make friends with it and essentially become, the provider for that pig, and it recognizes that, they're not necessarily going to want to leave. Unless there's, like you said, they get spooked, or if they're not getting fed, or there's not enough water or some reason.
So along those lines of food and water, what have you found as far as your feed? What are you using? What are you trying? Are you trying different things with your three?
So we're using, as of right now, we're feeding a Pollner swine grower. It's kind of a standard full ration hog feed. Because of our sort of lack of knowledge on the mast side of things and how much that actually produces for them, we were feeding them up until last week. We were going by a formula that somebody had given me of 1 pound of food per head for each month of the pig's age. So they were about 4 months old. We've been giving them 4 pounds a day each. I put a tape measure on them the other day, and I kind of used the tape measure to estimate where their weight was at, and actually posted in the pastured pig Facebook group to get some feedback. And based on that feedback, we're going to be going to a free choice feed for the next, basically to finish them out, to see how their weight ends up being. We're shooting for a 250 finish weight. I know the tape measure method is a little bit unreliable to some people. The numbers I worked out said that the one pig I checked was at 120 pounds. Obviously, that seems like it's a little low based on my visual analysis of it. But at the same time, the tape measure doesn't necessarily lie. So we're going to go to free choice and let them kind of decide what's best for them.
Yeah. So April, do my math here. How old are they now?
So April, May, June, July, August, September, about 5 months.
Yeah. It's a little on the light side. I agree with that assessment. Go to free choice and just see how they do. And again, those are one of the things, you're keeping records of that and just saying, okay, this is where we were last year. If we do this again next year, then maybe we introduce free choice a little earlier, or just come with a different model.
Yeah, and it was a little bit tough too, because there's a lot of info out there on pasturing pigs on grass, and what blends of, whether it's fodder, whether you're using a seed blend in a pasture, ryegrass, bluegrass, whatever you've got out there. I found a lot of info on that, but when you looked at raising pigs in the forest and, what mast was available, whether it was a soft mast, whether it was hard mast later in the season, there wasn't a lot of info out there. So I kind of just went with a baseline originally, and then now 5 months in, I'm getting feedback on what that baseline turned out to be.
Yeah, and that's another thing too that's tough, because I run into the same thing. The variety of mast we have in the woods, and of course just fully understanding the yield, because as you mentioned, as soon as it comes off the tree, it's gone. So you really can't conceptualize, okay, how much mast do these pigs actually encounter? How much have they been able to partake in, because they vacuum it up so quickly?
And even that changes year to year. I mean, the crop of acorns that I've seen in the woods so far this year for us has been double already what I saw for the total of last fall in the region. I mean, last year there were no acorns on the ground, and if I was relying on that mast to feed pigs, I mean, it would have been a lot less mast for them to consume and a lot more on the feed versus this year, where the acorn, it's not far enough along where we can really call it a bumper crop, but it looks like it could be headed that way.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely something that's completely out of your control and can really upset the operation if you're relying on that heavily. I've discovered when I've run as many as 25 in a group in the woods and give them free choice, that again, as you mentioned, they're smart animals, and they also like variety. So in my experience, they go through and they'll vacuum up all the mast that they can get, but then also return to the feeder, because they like the sweetness, they like the carbs, I guess, or you're giving them the energy, giving them the heat that they need in the cooler months. So it seems to me they're kind of figuring out what they want and how they want it. So I usually don't put mast into my consideration, my calculations of weight, but also watch the amount of consumption with the feed. That's one of the benefits of free choice. Of course, you can see, okay, this 500 pounds went this far versus, hey, when mast is on, the 500 pounds went a little further.
Yeah, and that's something I learned as well. Was for a while I was just keeping track of how much, how quickly I would go through a bag when I was feeding them individually. But now I can dump a couple bags in the feeder, and I know, all right, it's 100 pounds. Check it every day or every other day and see how far that's gone, and how long it takes them to eat through that 100 pounds of food.
Yeah, I'm curious. What? So you said your feeder right now was a homemade feeder that you had?
Yep. So homemade feeder. I made it out of some leftover 2x4s and some leftover plywood that I had kicking around. It's pretty simple. It's a lot like the metal ones you would buy in the store. I think Little Giant makes them. But basically, it's got an awning over the spot where the pig would eat, and there's a flap under there as well that they can lift up with their snout and kind of stick their head in. I may have built it a little bit bigger than needed to, because when we first brought them home, they could actually climb into the feed
Right.
And hang out in there. And that was one's way of keeping the other two from eating for a while, was just to crawl into the feeder, and you'd actually find them asleep in there every once in a while. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, king of the domain there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, obviously they're going to grow into that feeder, and when they get so big, they may even wreak a little havoc on that. That's always the thing you look at is when they get big, they can become bulldozers and tear a lot of things up.
Yeah, that was something I worried a lot. I had showed some pictures of it online, and a lot of people said, "Oh, they're going to destroy that thing." And so far, fingers crossed, knock on wood, they haven't chewed through it yet. So I'm keeping an eye on that, though. I do have a couple T-stakes hammered around it, and I've got it ratchet strapped to the T-stakes. That way they're not able to knock it over.
Yeah. So in the woods, how are you addressing it? You mentioned that you have a nipple system. How are you addressing wallow or anything like that when it comes to water?
So the water and the feeder are in kind of a 16, we have a 16 by 16 enclosure that we had put them in when they were piglets and we were training them to the electric. The way we ended up doing it was when they were trained to the wire and they were essentially big enough to kind of go out into the woods, we just pulled one of those 16-foot hog panels up. So they still have access to that area for their food, water. The pig house is in there as well. And they've formed a little bit of a wallow in there in front of the water. They've actually been pretty good about not letting the water from the barrel kind of run all over the place. If it's going to be pretty hot, I'll actually go out, and they dug a little bit of a wallow, and I'll throw some water in there for them so they can kind of roll around in it. But, again, knock on wood, we've gotten pretty lucky that they haven't tried to knock over the barrel or just emptied it out on us. They seem to be pretty responsible with their water as far as pigs go.
Yeah, and I would assume in New Hampshire, you all don't have to deal with the severe heat that we have here further south at times either.
No, we had a few days this summer that were up over 95, probably a week stretch. And
wow.
During that time, that was really the only stretch we had where it was that hot. And again, working from home, it's nice. I can go out, I can check on the pigs. I would go out there with the hose and I'd actually spray it down and they'd run around in it, just getting, wet and then rolling around in the mud. But other than that, it's been pretty good. They've been about as clean and responsible as pigs can be with not destroying the water and, making a mess of it.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, so looking back in these last 6 months, what would you say, Jack, have been your biggest challenges with raising pigs?
The biggest challenges for us have really been just kind of, one, the learning curve, kind of making that adjustment of like, with chickens, it's very easy for us to, make sure the feeders are filled, make sure the waters are filled and the electric fence is on. And, if we want to kind of take off for the weekend, we can do that. With the pigs, it's a little bit more involved, especially running them on 2-strand without a perimeter fence, kind of adjusting our lives to know that these animals are in our care, for 6-7 months at a clip. Other than that, the challenges really haven't been too far along, too involved for us. It's been a pretty easy transition to having these guys around.
So looking at that challenge of just understanding the management and the maintenance of that during this time of year, how would you say you overcome those? Just kind of rechange your schedule, just kind of change how you do certain things?
Yeah, we kind of decided when we that we were going to bring pigs on, that we were just going to be kind of the winter vacation family. We kind of joked that we realize now why when farmers go on vacation, it's in the winter months. So for us, it's kind of, we've adopted the after Christmas to before Easter vacation schedule, where that's kind of the period of time for the year where, you know, if we want to go take a trip, if we want to go visit family far away, we can do that. And letting that family members know that as well, that, hey, in the summertime, if you want to come see us, you know, you've got to come up and visit us in our domain. And everyone's been pretty understanding of that. They get what we're doing up here and kind of the changes that my wife and I have decided to make for us and our daughter. And it's been a relatively seamless transition so far.
Very good. Very good. So, I'm sorry, I keep having these indications pop up.
Oh, no problem.
I don't know if you can hear that or not. So looking at that, then, if these challenges that you've overcome, or you're kind of looking at how that schedule is going to work out, what about things that have been maybe relatively easier than you thought on the opposite end there?
I didn't know it was going to be as easy as it was to move essentially four halves of pork. At first I had thought like, oh great, you know, we're getting 3 pigs. This is going to be the really tricky part. Obviously for us, you know, being such a small operation, we're not going to be rolling in the cash after, you know, this year's pigs are done and butchered and on their way in the respective freezers. So it wasn't necessarily something that we wanted to throw money at via Facebook marketing or Instagram marketing or, you know, running ads in newspapers and things like that. Really, I mean, once we put word out to kind of friends and families, like, hey, we have 3 pigs, you know, we're going to be raising them, you know, on forest, they're going to be eating acorns, they're going to be supplemented with feed. Would people like to buy this pork? It really kind of happened pretty quickly where we didn't even have to go through any of the larger distribution channels, that we could kind of keep it within our friends and family. Obviously, if we decide to scale this up in the future and go that route to kind of have a little pastured pork side business, it would be a little bit, we would probably have to access those channels. But so far it's been pretty cool to keep it local and kind of see, you know, those that we know receptive to the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this first season, have you run into anything that's really just been frustrating? Have you experienced a circumstance, a bad day where you're like, man, this was a mistake. I wish I'd have never done this. Have you run into that yet?
There was one instance a couple months ago where we had a pretty nasty group of thunderstorms rolling in. It was like 1 a.m. and I'd gotten the notification on my phone from the Weather Channel. And at that point, we didn't necessarily know how the pigs would react to an electrical storm. And what ended up happening with that was I ended up going out into the woods at about 1:30 in the morning as it started pouring rain. And I was trying to corral the pigs into the 16 by 16 foot enclosure and get a hog panel up on one side, just so that we had a little bit of peace of mind sleeping overnight, that they weren't going to get scared by a clap of thunder and bust through the fence and run out into the night.
Right.
That was just about the hardest thing that we've had. You know, I remember coming in from that, and it was probably about 2:00 in the morning before I got in, and I was soaking wet, and I had to go on a trip for work the next day. And that was really kind of the low point of it. But other than that, I mean, they've been awesome. We joke that they're like a couple of little dogs running around in the woods. They're definitely goofy animals. They're fun. They have personalities. I mean, I don't want to bring about the stereotype of like the farmer sitting on his porch sipping an iced tea at the end of the day thinking about how great life is, but they've definitely been, on the whole, a valuable addition to, you know, have around the homestead.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting, you know, those I can remember back to those experiences, just the what ifs, the first times encountering things that you weren't quite sure how they were going to react. And again, in West Virginia, we don't normally have really, really cold winters, but one particular time we actually had -20 Fahrenheit. So it got pretty cold. And I think it was maybe my second year raising pigs. So I just thought, okay, they've got shelter, they're in the barn, but actually in that situation they had these small house hog pens that I had built. So I'm going up there and trying to tack this plastic over this door to think, okay, this is going to help, you know, keep them out of this cold if I put plastic over this door. And the same situation up there in the middle of the night, working by moonlight, freezing my butt off trying to put this plastic on. And I come up next morning to check on them, and they've torn all the plastic off and just ripped it to shreds. And they're out there in minus 20-degree weather, just flipping around, having a great old time. I was like, well, I guess they're not having any issues with the cold temperatures right now.
No, they're definitely not the most gracious animals sometimes to have on the homestead. But I think stories like that, though, and kind of the one that I just spoke about with the thunder and lightning, I mean, it kind of goes to the whole idea of having pastured pigs and, whether small scale or large scale, it's definitely something that the farmer, if you will, or the caretaker, it shows that they care more about the animals than, somebody that's just got them on a concrete floor in a warehouse, with artificial lighting, and they don't need to worry about these things.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a certain element there of husbandry, because not to say that a huge commercial operation's easy way out because of the investment on the front end, but there is a lot more peace of mind when you have an animal confined and you can control it. Now, disease and other things are a whole other issue, but you're right. When you decide to let a pig be more of a pig, it's an animal with a conscience. It's going to want to go where it wants to go, and you have to be aware of that. And there's other outside environmental elements that will affect how well that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so looking at. So you're getting close to finishing here. So you're going to be butchering in December. So at this time right now, as you and your wife sit down and kind of look through some of the details, what does 2020 look like? Are you going to continue with pastured pigs? Are you going to ramp up? Are you going to scale back?
We're definitely going to continue. It's a discussion that we haven't necessarily sat down and had yet. We're interested to kind of see how the butchering process plays out. Like I said, we are working with Dan of Butcher Meats Mobile Meats. We're actually going to be running a pork butchering workshop with him as well that weekend.
Oh, very good.
Where we're going to be opening it up to the public. And, he's got a great thing going where his level of animal husbandry is huge. I mean, he has deep respect for the animals that he's working with. And we really kind of want to foster that mentality amongst other people that are doing this on the small scale. Give me just 1 second. I'm letting dogs out because the wife is home and they're going to start barking. Go ahead, you guys. Callie, go ahead. Or not. You can stay in. So anyway, we're going to be working with him and have that going on. It's something that he and I have talked about doing regularly in the community. It's a cool opportunity to kind of rope more people in and get them involved in this kind of small scale production where you're more involved. And for us, I mean, the product is definitely a good thing to have at the end of the day, but it also is nice to know that we're providing that level of, product for other people that we care about as well. So I don't know if we're going to scale it up, but we're definitely going to keep it going, possibly grow it just by, small increments here and there.
Yeah. Maybe, are you looking to maybe expand some pasture or put some rotational elements into your woods there? Or?
Yeah, we've talked about actually, having some logging done this winter after the pigs are off pasture. We've got about 3 acres out back that we could turn into kind of a more wide open pasture. The timber would be worth selling, and it would be worth seeding that and getting it set up. We don't have anything set in stone on that. So far, pasturing them on forest has been pretty positive for us. So we're not really set in stone either way.
Yeah.
We have talked about adding goats to the homestead as well. So if we go that route, we would obviously want to have some more grassy type pasture for the goats, even though they do typically pretty well in forest. They'll blow through their kind of mass that they have pretty quickly.
Yeah, they're pretty voracious when it comes to that as well.
Yeah, woody understory. I mean, they're great at clearing land, but it's kind of tough to keep goats on, in the woods unless you're moving them pretty frequently.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, so as somebody who's got this first season, it's about to sunset, and this is your first attempt, and where you're at right now, what advice would you give to anyone that's maybe listening to this podcast that hasn't taken that plunge yet? They're thinking, they're where you were last year. They're thinking about this. What advice would you give?
I would say jump in with both feet. It's one of those things where, we've talked about it for a few years, and we were kind of always just, we had that, not necessarily a fallback plan, but we had that easier plan of, just getting our pork from a friend that raised pigs and, not necessarily having to do it ourselves. And when we decided to jump in and do it, we just kind of went in with both feet, and it really ended up, on the back end, not being as big of as much work or as much intensity as we expected it to be. And, I would say the biggest thing you can do is just do it. I mean, find somebody local, get a couple feeders. Like you said, 3 is a great number to start out with. And at the end of the season, you're not stuck with too much pork that you won't be able to eat through it in the course of a year. You can give away to friends and family, or, you can sell 2 pigs worth of it and actually make your money back and pay for your own pig.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, Jack, if people want to know more about what you've got going up there, you do have some social media and some web presence. If you don't mind, share that with us.
Yeah, so we're on what I kind of refer to as the big 3. We don't have our own website yet, but we are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can look us up, just the Mindful Homestead on Facebook and YouTube, and then we're at the Mindful Homestead on Instagram. And if you're interested in possibly the pork butchering workshop that we're going to be doing, the date on that is December 7th. I just worked out pricing with Dan today, and we're going to be it's going to be a full day course, $35 just for the course itself. And then $50, we're going to do a prepared breakfast and lunch if you wanted the lunch. So we wanted to make it really accessible. We're not looking to make money off of it. We really wanted to open it up and kind of let people come in and see the process that, hey, it's not just raising the animal, but at the end of it, it is something that you can do at home yourself if you'd like, or if you don't want to do it, there's guys like Dan out there that are providing an awesome service for the small-time producer.
All right. Very good. And you said you're in Southwest New Hampshire?
Southwestern New Hampshire, yeah. We're in a town called Greenfield. If you're from the area and you don't know where Greenfield is, we're kind of split the distance between Manchester and Keene. But if you're not from the area and you want to know where we are, we're about an hour and a half northwest of Boston. Okay.
Very good. Very good. Well, all right. Well, I was looking at some of your social media as we were talking there. One of your YouTube thumbnails. Is that you with the very long beard?
That is me with the very long beard. Yes, I have a long red beard, which I'm pretty well known for.
I'm digging that big time. I have absolutely no beard game, so I am very jealous. I have man envy right now, big time.
It's taken a while. I mean, I've had the beard since 2003. I haven't cut it off. It's been slowly getting longer and longer over the years, but it's become a part of me to the point where it was put in my wedding vows that I wasn't allowed to cut it off unless my wife told me to.
There you go. Very good. Oh, awesome. Well, Jack, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on and talking with us about getting started out. I think you've had some good fortune and you've got some good experiences already. And I pray that your butchering goes well and next year you have another successful year of raising hogs.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Troy. I appreciate it.
Well, have a good evening. Take care.
Well, again, I appreciate Jack coming on and taking the time. Yeah, it's kind of a hurdle to overcome. To come on and be interviewed when you're just getting started out and you're not quite sure what questions you're going to have to answer. So I appreciate Jack taking the time to come on. I think he's on the right track. He seems to have already had some good experiences, some good farming practices there. So I think he's going to be in good shape moving forward. Well, if you know anyone else that would be a good guest to have on our podcast, by all means, please drop me a note. You can go to redtoolhouse.com, click on our Pastured Pig podcast link, and you'll see ways that you can contact me there, or just contact me directly, Troy at redtoolhouse.com. Well, I pray everyone's having a great week and that things are going well on the farm. Take care, everybody.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.